The bomb detonated at 0847 hours, a dirty fireball that swallowed 3 American soldiers whole. The engineer responsible stood in the doorway of a compound 200 miles away, watching the footage on a cracked tablet, and he smiled. Not a small smile, a wide, proud grin that showed his teeth. He replayed it, once, twice, 3 times. Each explosion a masterpiece to him. Each scream a symphony. His fingers moved across the screen like a conductor pausing at the moment of impact, savoring it. He turned to his assistant and said in Pashto, "Send this to the others. Show them what happens when they walk our mountains." And then he laughed, a wet, rasping sound that echoed off stone walls. 12 American families would receive folded flags because of him. And he celebrated like it was a wedding. Before we go any further, if you want to see how this story ends, hit that subscribe button right now and stay until the very last word. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. Because what happens next, you won't believe it. Staff Sergeant Reese Callahan had been lying in the dirt for 70 hours straight. Not 70 hours of camping, 70 hours of not moving, not eating, barely breathing. Her body had become part of the mountainside covered in dust, rocks, brittle weeds. Her ghillie suit blended so perfectly into the Afghan terrain that even birds landed near her without fear. She had urinated into a tube. She had eaten protein paste from a pouch without lifting her head. Her spotter, Corporal Dylan Garrett, lay 3 feet to her left, just as still, just as invisible. They were a 2-person ghost. Their mission was clean on paper. Observe a compound. Wait for positive ID on the target. A bomb engineer named Khalid Rashid, the man whose devices had killed 17 Americans in 4 months. When he showed himself, eliminate him. 1 shot. Mission complete. Extract. Go home. But through her scope, Reese had seen something that made her blood run cold. 7 snipers. Not ordinary fighters. Not kids with AKs playing soldier. These were trained, disciplined, professional killers. She had spotted the first one on hour 16, a glint of glass on a rooftop 400 meters northeast of the compound. Then the second tucked into a grape hut window. Then the third dug into a stone wall. By hour 30, she had identified all 7, each one positioned with surgical precision. Overlapping fields of fire, interlocking kill zones. It was a sniper's nightmare, a perfectly designed death trap with no way through. And the worst part? They weren't guarding the compound, they were guarding the approach. Reese keyed her radio, her voice barely a whisper. "Overwatch to command, I have 7 enemy snipers in position. Repeat, 7 confirmed hostiles, trained, dug in, covering all approach vectors." There was a pause. Then a voice crackled back. "Overwatch command copies, stand by monsieur." She waited. Her heart rate stayed low, 54 beats per minute. She had trained for this. Breathing slow, muscle control, total calm, but her mind was racing. Garrett whispered beside her without moving his lips. "They know we're coming. Yeah, this isn't random. No, it's not." "So what do we do?" Reese didn't answer because she didn't have one yet. 3 hours later, the radio crackled again. "Overwatch, be advised, SEAL element is moving to your sector. ETA 20 minutes. Mission is still active. Maintain Overwatch." Her stomach dropped. SEALs. A full team. 8 operators. Elite fighters, yes, but they were walking straight into a meat grinder and they didn't know it. She keyed the mic. "Command negative. Advise SEAL element to hold position. Enemy sniper network is active and covering their route. They will be engaged before they reach the compound. Overwatch SEALs are mission critical. They have orders to secure the target. You are to provide cover and eliminate threats as needed. Command, you are not hearing me. There are 7 snipers. 7. I can see all of them and they can see the approach. The SEALs won't make it 50 meters. Silence. Then Overwatch, do your job." The line went dead. Reese closed her eyes for just a second. Then she opened them and went back to glassing the battlefield. 19 minutes later, she saw them. 8 shadows moving through the valley below, fast and low, using the terrain like they'd been born in it. Navy SEALs, professionals, ghosts in their own right. But ghosts or not, they were about to walk into a crossfire that would shred them. She watched the lead SEAL, callsign Havoc, signal his team to spread out. They moved in a wedge formation, weapons up scanning. Textbook. Beautiful even. And completely useless. Because 400 meters to their northeast, Reese watched an enemy sniper adjust his position, settling his rifle on a sandbag, tracking Havoc's movement through his scope. 300 meters to the west, another sniper did the same, targeting the rear of the formation. The trap was closing. Her radio hissed. It was Havoc's voice, tight and low. "Overwatch, Havoc, we're taking fire contact north." No shots had been fired yet, but he'd seen something. A reflection, a shadow. Something. Havoc overwatch. Stop movement now. You have multiple snipers zeroed on your position. How many? Reese's jaw tightened. 7. There was a long, terrible pause. Then Havoc's voice came back, barely a whisper. Overwatch. Too many. We can't advance. We're pinned. Reese felt her pulse tick up, 58-60. She scanned the snipers again. They hadn't fired yet. They were waiting. Disciplined. Patient. They wanted the SEALs deeper into the kill zone. They wanted them committed. Trapped. Garrett whispered beside her. We can't take all 7. I know. Even if we get 3, the others will light up the valley. The SEALs will be cut apart. I know. So what's the play? Reese stared through her scope. Her mind was moving at 1,000 miles an hour, calculating distances, wind speed, angles, timing. She had spent 70 hours watching these snipers. She knew their patterns. She knew when they shifted, when they blinked, when they breathed. She knew their blind spots. And then in the chaos of her thoughts, a plan formed. Insane, impossible, but it was there. She keyed the radio. Havoc overwatch. Go. Her voice was calm, steady, cold. Give me 12 minutes. I'll clear them all. Another pause. Longer this time. Overwatch. Say again. 12 minutes. I will eliminate all 7 snipers. Do not move until I give the word. She could almost hear Havoc's brain trying to process that. 7 enemy snipers, different distances, different angles, dug in, hidden, professional. 1 Marine, 1 rifle, 12 minutes. Finally, his voice came back. Overwatch. You sure about this? Reese's finger rested gently on the trigger guard. Her breathing slowed. Heartbeat dropped back to 54. Yeah, she said. I'm sure. She clicked off the radio and turned to Garrett. Mark time, 12 minutes starting now. He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Reese, mark it. He swallowed hard and pressed the timer on his watch. Marked. Reese settled her eye behind the scope. The world shrank. The mountains disappeared. The war disappeared. There was only the reticle, the target, in the wind. Target 1. Rooftop sniper. 412 meters. Elevated position. Watching the valley. She adjusted for wind left to right 2 knots. Adjusted for elevation. Adjusted for the slow curve of the earth itself. Her breath went out. The rifle bucked. The rooftop sniper's head snapped back and he collapsed out of sight. No one reacted, no alarm. The sound of the shot echoed off the mountains like distant thunder, impossible to pinpoint. Garrett whispered 11 minutes 40 seconds. Target 2, window sniper, 350 meters, partially concealed, hardest angle. She breathed, calculated, fired. The figure in the window jerked and disappeared. Still no alarm. 11 minutes 10 seconds. Target 3, stone wall, 290 meters, dug in deep, only his rifle barrel and the top of his head visible. Reese aimed for the shadow just beneath his turban. Breathe, fire, gone. 10 minutes 50 seconds. Target 4, and then her rifle jammed. The bolt didn't cycle. The casing didn't eject. The weapon went dead in her hands. Her heart rate spiked. 70, 80. She didn't curse, didn't panic. She immediately transitioned, pulled the charging handle, cleared the malfunction, checked the chamber. Dirt, a grain of sand in the wrong place at the wrong time. She blew it out, reloaded, charged. 8 seconds lost. Garrett's voice was tight. Reese, I'm good. Keep time. 10 minutes 30 seconds. But as she settled back into position, she saw something that made her stomach turn to ice. An 8th sniper, hidden, camouflaged, positioned on a ridge she hadn't fully glassed. And his rifle was pointed directly at Garrett. She saw his finger tighten on the trigger. She didn't think. Thinking took time, and time was something Dylan Garrett didn't have. The 8th sniper's finger was already pressing through the trigger pull, maybe 2 pounds of pressure away from sending a bullet through her spotter's skull, and Reese made a choice that went against every rule in the sniper handbook. She pivoted hard left, abandoning her planned sequence, swinging her rifle across a 40-degree arc, and her scope found him tucked into a crevice in the rocks, 220 meters out, partially hidden behind a twisted juniper branch. She didn't have time to calculate wind drift, didn't have time to adjust for the slight upward angle, didn't have time to confirm her breathing cycle. She just put the reticle on his upper thorax and pressed the trigger as his muzzle flashed. Both shots fired within 1/10 of a second of each other. Garrett's head jerked sideways and he let out a grunt that sounded like he'd been punched in the ribs. Reese's bullet hit the hidden sniper dead center and he folded backward into the rocks like a puppet with cut strings. She didn't wait to confirm the kill. She was already rolling toward Garrett, her rifle still in one hand, reaching for him with the other. "Dylan, talk to me." He was breathing, fast and shallow. His hand was pressed against the side of his head, and blood was running between his fingers. For one terrible second, she thought she'd been too slow. Thought she'd lost him, but then he pulled his hand away, and she saw the wound. The bullet had grazed him, carved a 2-inch furrow along his temple, and took off the top half of his ear, but it hadn't penetrated his skull. Another inch to the right, and he'd be dead. "I'm good, he gasped, and I'm good. You're hit. I'm good. Finish it. Finish the mission." She stared at him. Blood was pouring down the side of his face, soaking into his collar, but his eyes were clear, focused. He shoved her shoulder hard. "You've got 6 left in 9 minutes. Go." She went. Back into position, scope up. Hard hammering now, 90 beats per minute, way too high, but she forced it down, forced the adrenaline back, forced herself into the cold, quiet place where nothing existed except the math and the wind and the target. Garrett was saying something behind her, his voice tight with pain, but she couldn't hear the words. She was already locking onto target 4. Grape hut, 320 meters, sniper repositioning after hearing the distant shots, moving from one window to another. Amateur move. Movement draws the eye. She led him by half a body length, squeezed. He stumbled and went down inside the hut out of sight. Garrett's voice cut through. 8 minutes, 20 seconds. Target 5. Dug into a depression on the hillside, 460 meters. Long shot. He was smart, hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, waiting to see where the threat was coming from. She could barely see him, just the curve of his shoulder and a sliver of his face behind the rifle stock. She aimed for the sliver. The rifle kicked. The sliver disappeared. 7 minutes 50. Target 6, rooftop different in building, 380 meters. He was moving now, scrambling, finally realizing his team was being picked apart by someone he couldn't see. He made it 4 steps before Reese's bullet caught him between the shoulder blades and he dropped like a stone. 7 minutes 10. 1 left. Target 7, the smart one, the patient one. He hadn't moved at all, hadn't given her an angle. He was tucked deep into a hardened position behind stacked sandbags with only his rifle muzzle visible, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He'd seen 6 of his teammates die in under 5 minutes, and he'd done the only thing that made sense. He'd gone into full lockdown. No exposure, no silhouette, nothing for her to shoot at. And worse, his position covered the exact route the SEALs needed to take. Reese glassed him for 10 seconds, 15, 20. He didn't move, didn't shift, didn't give her anything. Garrett's voice was getting weaker. 6 minutes 40. She keyed her radio. Havoc Overwatch. Go Overwatch. 6 down, 1 remaining. Northeast position, behind sandbags. He's dug in and I don't have a shot. There was a pause. She could hear Havoc breathing on the other end, could hear him running calculations in his head. Then his voice came back hard and flat. "Can you suppress him?" "Negative, he's got hard cover. If I fire, he'll know my position and I lose my advantage." "Then we're still pinned." "I know." Another pause. Then Havoc said something that made her chest tighten. "Overwatch. How much time do you need?" She understood what he was asking. He was offering to draw fire, to expose his team, to give her the split second she needed when the last sniper shifted to engage them. It was a suicide play. "Negative, Havoc. Stand by, I'm working it." She clicked off before he could argue and went back to the scope. The sniper hadn't moved. Smart, disciplined. He knew she was out there somewhere and he wasn't going to give her a thing, so she'd have to give him something instead. She shifted her aim 30 degrees left and fired a round into the dirt near the compound entrance. The sound echoed across the valley, a clear, obvious shot from a new angle. Bait. The sniper didn't bite. She fired again. Closer this time. Kicked up dust near his position. Still nothing. Garrett whispered, 5 minutes 50. "Reese, what are you doing?" "Fishing." She fired a 3rd round, this one intentionally high, zinging off the stone wall, 2 feet above the sniper's position. And this time finally he moved. Just a fraction. Just a tiny shift as he adjusted his position to get an angle on where he thought she was. It was enough. She saw a sliver of his face, just his eye and part of his cheekbone behind the sandbag. Maybe 3 inches of exposed target. She didn't hesitate. The shot was perfect. The sniper's head snapped back and he slumped forward over his rifle, motionless. 747. Garrett's voice was barely a whisper now. 5 minutes 20. All targets down. Reese keyed the radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her veins. "Havoc Overwatch. All sniper threats eliminated. You are clear to advance." The relief in Havoc's voice was palpable. "Overwatch, Havoc copies. Moving now. Outstanding work. She didn't respond. She was already scanning the compound through her scope, looking for secondary threats, looking for the primary target, looking for anything that could still go wrong. Because in her experience, everything could still go wrong. The SEALs moved fast. They covered the distance to the compound in under 3 minutes, flowing around corners and through doorways like water weapons, up scanning and clearing. She watched them disappear inside the main building, and then there was nothing to do but wait. Garrett was still bleeding beside her. She risked a glance at him and saw his face had gone pale. "How you doing?" "Fantastic. Thinking about re-enlisting." "That's the blood loss talking." "Probably." She pulled a pressure bandage from her kit and pressed it against the side of his head. He winced but didn't pull away. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You'd have done the same." "Maybe, but you broke the mission to do it." She didn't answer that because he was right. She'd abandoned the planned sequence, broken protocol, made a choice that could have cost the SEALs everything, and she'd do it again without hesitation. The radio crackled. "Overwatch Havoc. Compound secure. No sign of primary target. Repeat, Khalid Rashid is not on site." Her stomach dropped. "Say again, Havoc." "Target is not here. Building is empty except for low-level fighters. We're searching for intel now." She closed her eyes. 70 hours, 7 sniper kills, Garrett bleeding beside her. And the whole reason they were here, the bomb maker, the engineer, the man responsible for 17 American deaths, wasn't even in the compound. It was a dry hole, but then Havoc's voice came back urgent. "Overwatch, we've got documents here. Ledgers, photos. This is a coordination site. They're planning something big." "How big?" "Awing. Multi-target, coordinated strikes. Looks like they're hitting 3 forward operating bases simultaneously within the next 48 hours. Reese's mind raced. 3 FOBs, hundreds of American soldiers. If those attacks went forward, the casualty count would be catastrophic. "Havoc, can you stop it?" "Not from here. We need to find Rashid. He's the linchpin. Without him, the network falls apart." There was a pause. "Overwatch, we're going to need more time to process this site. Can you maintain Overwatch?" "Affirmative, we're not going anywhere." But as she said it, she saw movement on the ridge to the east. Not SEALs, not friendlies. A group of fighters, maybe a dozen, moving toward the compound fast. They'd heard the shooting. They were coming to investigate. She keyed the mic. "Havoc, you have got company. 12 hostiles approaching from the east. ETA, 4 minutes." "Copy. We need at least 10 to get what we need here." "You don't have 10. Then make us some time." The line went dead. Garrett looked at her, blood still running down his face. "How are we supposed to hold off 12 fighters?" She settled back behind her rifle, carefully. The fighters were moving in a loose formation, weapons ready, heads on swivels. They knew something was wrong. They'd seen the sniper positions go silent. They were cautious, smart. Reese waited until they were 300 meters out, then she fired. The lead fighter dropped. The others scattered immediately, diving for cover behind rocks and low walls. Professional response. These weren't kids, these were trained soldiers. She worked the bolt and fired again. Missed. The target had moved faster than she'd anticipated. She adjusted and fired a third time. Hit. The fighter went down, clutching his leg. 10 left. They started returning fire, but they didn't know where she was. Rounds snapped overhead and kicked up dirt 20 meters to her right. Wild shots. Guessing. She stayed calm and picked her targets. Another shot, another hit. The fighter collapsed behind a boulder, 9 left. But now they were adapting, splitting up, flanking, using fire and movement. 2 of them were suppressing her general area, while the others advanced by bounds. It was textbook infantry tactics, and it was working. Garrett grabbed his rifle with his good hand. "I can shoot. You can barely see straight." "I can see straight enough." He wasn't wrong. Even wounded, even bleeding, Dylan Garrett was one of the best shots in the battalion. She nodded, and he settled in beside her, sighting through his scope with his one good eye. They worked together the way they'd trained. She called targets. He confirmed. They fired in sequence. 2 more fighters went down, 7 left. But the others were getting close now. 200 meters, 150. They were using the terrain perfectly, staying low, moving fast. And then one of them did something that made Reese's blood run cold. He pulled out a radio and started talking, calling for reinforcements. She shot him before he could finish the transmission, but the damage was done. Somewhere out there, more fighters had heard the call. They'd be coming, maybe 20, maybe 50. She keyed her mic. "Havoc, how much longer?" 3 minutes. "You need to move faster." "Working on it." A bullet cracked past her head so close, she felt the pressure wave. The fighters had spotted her muzzle flash. They were zeroing in, She and Garrett had to move. Now. Displace, she hissed. They low-crawled 15 meters to the right, dragging their rifles staying below the ridgeline. Rounds chewed up the ground where they had been lying seconds before. They settled into a new position, and Reese immediately found a target. Fired, hit. The fighter spun and dropped. 6 left. But now she could hear engines in the distance. Vehicles, moving fast. The reinforcements were coming. Garrett heard them too. Reese, we need to go. Not yet. We're about to be overrun. I said not yet. She fired again. And again. Methodical, controlled, buying seconds, buying time. Each shot a message to the fighters below. Keep your heads down or die. 4 left. The radio crackled. Overwatch Havoc. We're moving. Exfil in 60 seconds. Copy. Get clear of the compound. We'll cover you. The SEALs came out fast. 8 shadows moving in formation, carrying hard drives and documents in waterproof bags. They headed south away from the approaching vehicles, using the terrain to mask their movement. And that's when everything fell apart. A pickup truckman with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed came screaming around the eastern ridge, 50 cal rounds tearing up the ground behind the SEALs. They scattered, diving for cover, but they were exposed, caught in the open. The gunner walked his fire toward them, tracers arcing through the twilight. And Reese knew if she didn't do something in the next 3 seconds, those 8 men were dead. She swung her rifle toward the technical. It was moving, bouncing over rough ground. The range was over 600 meters. The gunner was behind a steel shield. It was an impossible shot. She took it anyway. The bullet punched through the technical's windshield, and the driver slumped forward. The truck swerved, hard rolled, and the gunner was thrown clear. The 50 cal went silent. The SEALs ran, but more vehicles were coming. She could see dust trails now. 3, 4, maybe more. Garrett's hand gripped her shoulder. Reese, we have to leave. Right now. She knew he was right. They'd done their job. They'd cleared the snipers. They'd bought the SEALs time. They'd saved the mission. Staying longer wasn't brave, it was suicide. But as she started to pull back, her scope passed over the compound entrance one last time, and she saw him. Khalid Rashid, the bomb maker, the engineer, the target. He was right there, stepping out of a hidden entrance she hadn't known existed, moving fast toward a motorcycle parked in the shadows. He'd been there the whole time. Underground. Hiding. Running. Her mind went blank. Everything else disappeared. The approaching vehicles. The gunfire. Garrett bleeding beside her. The SEALs extracting. All of it vanished. There was only the target. He threw a leg over the motorcycle and kicked it to life. The range was 940 meters. He was moving. Accelerating. In 10 seconds, he'd be gone, disappearing into the mountains where they'd never find him. And those coordinated attacks on the FOBs would go forward. Hundreds of Americans would die. Garrett saw what she was looking at. Reese, no, that shot's impossible. She was already doing the math. Wind right to left. 3 knots. Target moving at roughly 30 kilometers per hour. Increasing distance. Fading light. Reese. She exhaled slowly. Found the stillness, put the reticle 3 feet ahead of the motorcycle, and fired. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. The motorcycle kept moving. Rashid kept riding, then he jerked sideways, and the bike went down, tumbling end over end, throwing him into the dirt. He didn't get up. Garrett stared at her. Did you just... Yeah, that was 900. I know. The radio erupted. Overwatch. What the hell was that? Who are you shooting? She keyed the mic, her voice calm. Havoc Overwatch. Primary target is down. Khalid Rashid is eliminated. Mission complete. There was stunned silence. Then Havoc's voice came back, incredulous. You got him. Confirmed. Jesus Christ, Overwatch. How far was that shot? Far enough. But even as she said it, she knew they had a bigger problem. Because every fighter in the area had just watched that motorcycle go down. They knew exactly where the shot had come from. And now they were coming for her. The first vehicle crested the ridge 40 seconds later, and Reese knew immediately they were out of time. It wasn't just one truck anymore. It was 5, maybe 6. Fighters were pouring out before the vehicles even stopped moving, spreading out in a coordinated sweep pattern that told her these weren't random militia. These were trained soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. They were hunting her. Garrett was already grabbing their gear, stuffing everything into his pack with his good hand, while blood continued to drip from his ruined ear. We need to move right now. She fired one more round into the approaching line, saw a fighter drop, then rolled backward off the ridge. They scrambled down the reverse slope, using every bit of cover they could find, moving fast, but not panicked. Panic got you killed. Training kept you alive. The radio crackled in her ear. Overwatch Havoc, what's your status? Compromised, multiple hostiles converging on our position. We're displacing west. Negative Overwatch. West puts you deeper into enemy territory. Exfil Bird is northeast 2 kilometers from your position. Northeast is where they're coming from. Then you need to go around them. We'll provide covering fire from our position. She almost laughed. They were 2 kilometers away in the opposite direction. Their covering fire would be useless. But she didn't say that. She just keyed the mic and said, copy, moving now. They ran. Not a straight line. That would get them killed. They moved in broken patterns, using the terrain staying low, changing direction every 30 seconds. Behind them, she could hear shouting in Pashto, the sound of engines revving the crack of gunfire as the fighters shot at shadows. They hadn't pinpointed her yet, but they would soon. It was only a matter of time. Garrett stumbled and she caught him by the arm, keeping him upright. His face had gone gray. I'm slowing you down. Shut up and run. Reese, I'm serious. Leave me. Get to the exfil. She didn't even dignify that with a response. She just tightened her grip on his arm and pulled him forward. They crashed through a dry stream bed, scrambled up the far side, and dove behind a cluster of boulders just as a burst of automatic fire chewed up the ground where they'd been standing. Too close. They were too close. She risked a glance back and saw at least a dozen fighters moving through the valley below weapons, up coordinating by radio. They were executing a textbook sweep in clear. Professional, methodical, deadly. Garrett was breathing hard beside her, his hand pressed against the bandage on his head. How many you count? 12, maybe 15? Great odds. Could be worse. How? Could be 20. He let out a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. It was hard to tell. She checked her ammunition. 4 rounds left in the magazine. 2 spare magazines in her pouch. 34 rounds total. Garrett had maybe 20. Against 15 fighters with automatic weapons and vehicles and reinforcements probably already on the way. The math wasn't good. She keyed her radio. Havoc Overwatch. We're pin bombed down. Grid November 74286. Multiple hostiles closing. Request immediate support. Static. Then Havoc's voice came back tense and clipped. Overwatch, be advised, we just lost comms with command. We're trying to get CAS on station, but the earliest window is 20 minutes. 20 minutes. She and Garrett wouldn't last 5. Copy, she said simply, because there was nothing else to say. She turned to Garrett. We need to thin them out. With what harsh language? With this. She pulled out her last fragmentation grenade. When they come through that stream bed, I'm going to drop this on their heads. Soon as it detonates, we move hard northeast. No stopping, no looking back. He nodded, checking his rifle with shaking hands. And if they don't come through the stream bed, then we improvise. They waited. 30 seconds. A minute. The voices were getting closer. She could hear individual words now. Orders being given. Positions being called out. They were coordinating a final push. Then she saw the first fighter enter the stream bed, weapon up, moving carefully. Another followed. Then 2 more. They were bunching up in the natural choke point exactly like she'd hoped. She pulled the pin, counted 2 seconds and threw. The grenade arced through the air and dropped perfectly into the middle of the stream bed. She didn't wait to see the explosion. She grabbed Garrett, and they were already running when the blast wave hit a concussive thump that rattled her teeth and sent rocks flying. Screams erupted behind them. Confusion. Chaos. They ran straight into it. Not away from the explosion, toward it. Because the last thing the surviving fighters would expect was for 2 Americans to charge directly at them through the smoke and dust. She fired as she moved, not aimed shots, just suppressing fire to keep heads down. Garrett was right beside her, limping badly now, but still moving, still fighting. They broke through this kill zone and kept running. Behind them, the shouting intensified. Someone was organizing a pursuit. They had maybe a 30-second head start. She used it. They hit a narrow goat path that switched back up a steep ridge, and she pushed Garrett ahead of her, covering their 6 with her rifle. A fighter appeared at the base of the path, and she fired without thinking. He went down. Another appeared, and she fired again. The rifle clicked empty. She dropped the spent magazine, reloaded, and kept moving. The path got steeper. Garrett was struggling now, his breathing ragged, his legs barely holding him up. She got behind him and pushed physically, shoving him up the slope. Come on, Dylan. Come on. Almost there. Almost where? Good question. She didn't have an answer. They were just moving, just surviving, 1 second at a time. They crested the ridge and she saw something that made her heart sink. More vehicles. 2 trucks racing across the valley from the west, cutting off their escape route. They were being boxed in, surrounded. Garrett saw them too. Oh, that's just perfect. She pulled him down behind a rock outcropping and tried to think. They couldn't go back, couldn't go forward. East was a sheer cliff. West was where the fighters were coming from. They were trapped on a ridgeline with maybe 2 minutes before they were overrun. The radio crackled. Overwatch Havoc, we've got you on thermals. You're surrounded. Do you have a defensive position? Negative, we're on a ridgeline with no cover. There was a long pause, then Havoc's voice came back quieter. Overwatch, it's been an honor. She understood what he was saying. He was saying goodbye. He was saying they'd done everything they could. He was saying there was no way out. Garrett heard it too. He looked at her with blood-crusted eyes and said, well, this is it, huh? She was about to answer when she heard something that didn't make sense. A sound that didn't belong in the Hindu Kush mountains. A deep, rhythmic thumping that grew louder with each passing second. Rotors. She looked up and saw the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen in her life. An Apache attack helicopter rising over the eastern ridge, its chin-mounted gun already rotating toward the valley below. The radio exploded with a new voice. Overwatch, this is Saber 2-1. I understand you've got a pest problem. Pointed at me at the targets. She couldn't speak for a second, couldn't process what was happening. Then training kicked in, and she grabbed her laser designator painting the trucks racing across the valley. Saber 2-1 Overwatch. Target priority, 2 vehicles moving west to east. Troops in contact, immediate vicinity. Copy. Guns, guns, guns. The Apache's 30mm chain gun opened up, and the world turned into fire and thunder. The first truck disintegrated, ripped apart by high explosive rounds. The second swerved and tried to run, but the Apache tracked it effortlessly, chewing it to pieces. Fighters scattered in all directions, but there was nowhere to hide from the thermal optics. The helicopter moved like a hunting predator, methodical and merciless. In 90 seconds, it was over. The valley went silent except for the thump of the Apache's rotors as it circled overhead, scanning for additional targets. Bree sat down hard, her legs suddenly unable to hold her weight. Garrett collapsed beside her, laughing and crying at the same time. I thought we were dead. I thought we were actually dead. We were. Her voice came out shaky. We should be. The Apache pilot's voice came back on the radio, calm and professional. Overwatch area is secure. Exfil Bird is inbound to your position. ETA 3 minutes. Sit tight. She keyed the mic with trembling hands. Saber 2-1 Overwatch. I don't know where you came from, but I owe you a drink. Negative Overwatch. After what you did today, I owe you a case. Saber 2-1 out. The Black Hawk appeared 2 minutes later, flaring hard and touching down on the ridgeline, just long enough for them to climb aboard. Hands reached out and pulled them in. A medic immediately went to work on Garrett, checking his vitals, cleaning his wound. Someone handed Reese a bottle of water, and she drank it without tasting it. The helicopter lifted off, and she looked down at the compound below at the valley where she'd spent 70 hours becoming part of the earth, at the scattered bodies of the fighters who'd hunted them. It all looked smaller from up here, less real, like something from a movie instead of something she'd just survived. Havoc's voice came over the internal comms. Overwatch Havoc, that was the most incredible shooting I've ever seen. You saved our entire team. She didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process it. So she just said, just doing my job. That was a hell of a lot more than your job. There was a pause. How's your spotter? She looked at Garrett. The medic had him stabilized IV in his arm, fresh bandages on his head. He gave her a weak thumbs up. He'll live. Good, because command is going to want to debrief both of you the second we land. She closed her eyes. The debrief. Right. Because killing 7 enemy snipers, eliminating a high-value target, and discovering plans for a major coordinated attack wasn't the end of the mission. It was just the beginning of the paperwork. The flight back to base took 40 minutes. She spent most of it staring out the window, watching the mountains slide past below, trying to quiet the adrenaline still screaming through her system. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, small tremors she couldn't control. The aftermath of the fight or flight response, her body finally allowing itself to react now that the immediate danger had passed. Garrett noticed. First time what? First time you thought you weren't coming back. She didn't answer for a long moment. Then she said quietly, yeah, gets easier. Does it? He smiled, then winced as the expression pulled at his wounds. No, not really, but we tell ourselves that anyway. The Black Hawk touched down at Forward Operating Base Salerno just after midnight. A medical team was waiting. They took Garrett, immediately loading him onto a stretcher despite his protest that he could walk. An officer she didn't recognize approached her as soon as she stepped off the bird. Staff Sergeant Callahan. Yes, sir? Colonel Brennan wants to see you now. Her stomach tightened. Am I in trouble, sir? The officer's expression didn't change. That depends on how you define trouble. She followed him through the base to a command building, still carrying her rifle, still wearing her blood-stained ghillie suit. Heads turned as they passed. Word had already spread. Marines didn't gossip, but they talked, and a story like this traveled fast. Colonel Brennan was waiting in a small office, standing behind a desk covered with maps and photographs. He was a compact man with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked at her for a long moment without speaking. Then he said, "Tell me what happened." She did. She went through it chronologically, leaving nothing out. The 70-hour surveillance, the 7 enemy snipers, the SEAL team moving into the kill zone, her decision to clear all 7 targets, the rifle jam, the 8th sniper shooting Garrett, her choice to save him instead of continuing the mission, the engagement with the fighters, the shot that killed Rashid. When she finished, Brennan was silent for a long time. Then he said, "You broke protocol." "Yes, sir." "You made tactical decisions without authorization." "Yes, sir." "You engaged targets outside your assigned mission parameters." "Yes, sir." "And you exposed your position to save your spotter, potentially compromising the entire operation." She met his eyes. "Yes, sir." Brennan picked up a piece of paper from his desk. "The SEAL team commander has submitted a formal commendation. He credits you with saving 8 American lives. The intelligence they recovered from that compound has already prevented 3 major attacks. Early estimates suggest your actions saved somewhere between 200 and 300 American soldiers who would have been killed in those coordinated strikes." He paused. "The bomb maker you eliminated, Khalid Rashid, was the most wanted insurgent in this sector. We've been hunting him for 7 months. You killed him with a single shot from almost 1,000 meters while he was moving on a motorcycle and failing in light." Another pause. "Your spotter, Corporal Garrett, will make a full recovery. He's already telling everyone who'll listen that you're the best shot in the Marine Corps." Brennan set down the paper and looked at her directly. "You also violated standing orders. You made unauthorized tactical decisions. You endangered yourself and your teammate, and you took a shot on a high-value target without clearance." Her throat was tight. "Yes, sir. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to receive a Silver Star for exceptional valor in combat, and you're also going to receive a formal reprimand for failure to follow orders. Both will go in your service record. Both will follow you for the rest of your career." She didn't know what to say. Pride and shame mixed together in her chest until she couldn't tell them apart. Brennan's expression softened just slightly. "Staff Sergeant, I've been in this job for 23 years. I've seen a lot of Marines do a lot of incredible things. What you did out there today ranks in the top 5, maybe top 3. You displayed courage, skill, and tactical brilliance under the most extreme circumstances imaginable." He sat down heavily. "You also displayed something else. Something harder to quantify, but just as important. You made a choice to save your teammate when you could have completed the mission. Most snipers wouldn't have done that. Most snipers would have stayed on target, trusted their spotter to survive, and finish the sequence. But you didn't. You chose the man over the mission." He looked at her carefully. "Do you regret that choice?" She thought about Garrett bleeding beside her, thought about the half-second decision to pivot her rifle, thought about how easily it could have gone wrong. "No, sir, I don't." Brennan nodded slowly. "Neither do I. But it was still the wrong call by doctrine, and doctrine exists for a reason. So you get the medal and the reprimand, both, because that's what the situation earned." He stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the gray area, Staff Sergeant, where the right thing and the wrong thing are sometimes the same thing." She shook his hand, her mind still trying to process everything. "You're dismissed. Get some sleep. Debrief continues at 0800. She saluted and left. Outside, the base was settling into the quiet rhythm of night operations. She walked to the medical tent and found Garrett sitting up in bed, fresh stitches on his head, arguing with a nurse about being discharged. He saw her and grinned. "Hey, you in trouble?" "Yes." "How much trouble?" "Some. You?" "They're trying to send me home. I told them to go to hell." The nurse rolled her eyes. "He's lost too much blood. He needs at least a week of observation." "I'm fine. Look, I can count to 10. 1, 2, 3, in Pashto." He paused. "Okay, I can't do that, but I'm still fine." Reese sat down on the edge of his bed. They didn't say anything for a minute. Didn't need to. Some things didn't require words. Finally, Garrett said quietly, "You saved my life." "You would have done the same." "Maybe, but you actually did it. So, thank you." She nodded, not trusting her voice. He looked at her carefully. Was it worth it? She knew what he was asking. Was saving one teammate worth potentially failing the mission? Worth the reprimand? Worth everything that came with that choice? She thought about the SEALs walking into that valley, about the coordinated attacks that had been stopped, about Khalid Rashid lying dead in the dirt, and she thought about Dylan Garrett sitting here alive. Yeah, she said finally. It was worth it. He smiled and closed his eyes, exhausted. Within seconds, he was asleep. She sat there for a while longer, watching him breathe, thinking about choices and consequences in the impossible mathematics of war. Then she stood and walked out into the Afghan night, carrying the weight of what she'd done and knowing she'd carry it forever. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the 8th sniper's muzzle flash, saw Garrett's head jerk sideways, saw the blood. Her hand still had a faint tremor she couldn't control. At 0300, she gave up trying and went to the range instead, the only place on base that made sense to her anymore. The night guard looked surprised to see her. Ma'am, range is closed until 0600. I know. I just need to clean my weapon. He saw the look on her face and stepped aside. Take your time, Staff Sergeant. She sat at a bench under a single flickering bulb and field stripped, her rifle laying out each component with mechanical precision. Bolt, firing pin, trigger assembly. She'd done this 1,000 times, but tonight her fingers fumbled. Clumsy, uncoordinated. The tremor was getting worse. She tried to reassemble the bolt and dropped it. The metal piece clattered across the concrete floor, and she stared at it, feeling something crack inside her chest. Her hands were shaking so badly now she couldn't make them stop. She pressed them flat against the bench and closed her eyes, breathing slowly, trying to find the calm center she'd lived in for 70 hours. It wasn't there anymore. A voice spoke behind her. First time's always the hardest. She turned and saw a gunnery sergeant she didn't recognize, older, maybe 50, with the weathered face of someone who'd seen multiple deployments. He walked over and picked up the bolt, handing it to her. I'm fine, she said. Sure you are. That's why you're shaking like a leaf at 3 in the morning. He sat down across from her. Mind if I tell you something? She didn't answer, but he took it as permission anyway. 20 years ago, I was in Fallujah, house-to-house fighting. One of my Marines, kid named Torres, got hit by a sniper. Took a round through the neck. I watched him bleed out in my arms, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. He paused. That night, I came out here just like you. Sat at this same bench, couldn't stop shaking. Couldn't put my weapon back together. Thought I was broken. What happened? My platoon sergeant found me, sat me down, told me something I've never forgotten. He looked at her directly. He said the shaking isn't weakness. It's proof you're still human. The day you stop shaking after taking a life or watching someone die, that's the day you need to worry. She stared at her hands. How long does it last? The shaking, few hours, few days sometimes. He stood up. But the weight that's permanent, you just learn to carry it better. He left her alone after that. She sat there for another hour, slowly reassembling her rifle, letting her hands remember the patterns, letting the familiar motions calm her nervous system. By the time she finished, the tremor had faded to something manageable. The debrief at 0800 was brutal. 3 intelligence officers, 2 from the CIA, all of them wanting every detail of what she'd seen during those 70 hours. They made her go through it chronologically, then backward, then by topic. How many fighters had she observed? What weapons, what vehicles, what routines? Had she seen any other high-value targets? Had Rashid met with anyone, spoken to anyone? She answered everything mechanically, her mind somewhere else, until one of the CIA officers asked a question that made her focus. Staff Sergeant, in your observation, how many fighters were stationed at that compound on a regular basis? 15 to 20, rotating shifts. And how many responded when the SEAL team was discovered? She thought back. 50, maybe 60. Exactly, which means they had a quick reaction force staged nearby. Very nearby. They were expecting an attack. The other CIA officer leaned forward. We think there's a leak. Someone with access to operational planning. That compound should have been a soft target. Instead, it was fortified and they had reinforcements ready to go. The only reason the mission succeeded is because you eliminated their sniper network before they could coordinate a defense. The first officer pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed a man in his 40s, clean-shaven, wearing traditional Afghan clothing, but with expensive sunglasses and a satellite phone. This man was seen leaving the compound 3 hours before the SEAL team arrived. We believe he's the courier, the one who warned them. Reese studied the photo. Something about it triggered a memory. I saw him. All 3 officers went still. When, day 2 of my observation, he arrived at the compound in a white Toyota, stayed maybe 20 minutes, then left heading southeast. Did you get a vehicle registration? No, but I can tell you he was carrying a leather satchel, brown weathered, and he limped slightly on his left leg. The officers exchanged glances. One of them made a note. That matches our intelligence. His name is Tariq Massoud, former Afghan National Army. We've suspected him of working with insurgents for months, but we've never been able to prove it. Can you find him? We're working on it, but he's smart, moves constantly, never stays in one place more than a few hours. The officer looked at her carefully. If we locate him, would you be willing to provide positive identification? Yes. Even if it meant going back out there? She didn't hesitate. Yes. The debrief ended 2 hours later. She walked out exhausted, every muscle in her body aching, and nearly collided with Havoc in the hallway. The SEAL operator looked different in daylight, younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with sharp blue eyes and a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Staff Sergeant Callahan, been looking for you. Sir. Drop the sir, I'm not an officer. He extended his hand. I wanted to thank you personally. What you did yesterday, I've never seen anything like it. She shook his hand, uncomfortable with the praise. Just doing my job. Bullshit, you went way beyond your job. You saved my entire team. He paused. I heard about the reprimand. That's garbage. You made the right call every single time. The Marine Corps doesn't always agree with right calls. Yeah, well, the Marine Corps isn't always right. He pulled a small object from his pocket, a challenge coin with the SEAL trident on one side. This is from my team, all of us. We want you to have it. She took it, surprised by the weight of it. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just know that 8 men went home to their families because of you. That's worth more than any medal or reprimand. He started to leave, then turned back. One more thing. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call me, day or night. You've got brothers in the teams now. He walked away before she could respond. She stood there holding the coin, feeling the weight of it, the meaning of it, and for the first time since the mission ended, she felt something other than exhaustion. She felt proud. The next 3 days blurred together. Medical evaluations, psych evaluations, more debriefs. She saw Garrett twice, both times in the medical tent, where they were still keeping him for observation despite his loud protests. He looked better each time, color returning to his face, the spark coming back to his eyes. On the 4th day, Colonel Brennan called her back to his office. Staff Sergeant, sit. She sat wondering what was coming now. Brennan slid a folder across the desk. The Silver Star ceremony is scheduled for next week. Your family will be flown in. There'll be media, the whole dog and pony show. Yes, sir. But before that happens, I need to tell you something. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The CIA found Tariq Massoud, the courier, the leak. Her pulse quickened. Where? A village 40 kilometers north of here. They've been watching him for 2 days, building a pattern of life profile. They're planning to take him tomorrow night. He looked at her directly. They want you on the mission. They need someone who can positively identify him before they move in. I'll do it. You don't have to. You've already done more than enough. I said I'll do it. Brennan nodded slowly. You'll be embedded with a Delta team. They're running the operation. Your job is simple: confirm identity, then stay out of their way. No heroics, no improvising. Just ID the target and let them do their job. Clear them. Crystal, sir. Good. Briefing is at 1800. Get some rest before then. But she didn't rest. She went to the armory and checked out a fresh rifle, then spent 4 hours on the range, putting rounds down range until her shoulder was bruised and her hands remembered how to be steady. The tremor was gone now. The muscle memory had returned. She was ready. The briefing that evening was attended by 8 Delta operators, 2 CIA officers, and a helicopter pilot. The team leader was a quiet captain named Voss, who spoke in short, efficient sentences and radiated the kind of calm competence that made everyone else in the room relax. He laid out the plan on a tactical map. Target is staying in a compound here. 2-story structure, stone construction, 3 entrances. He's got 4 guards with him, low-level fighters. We hit at 0200 when they're at their lowest alert. Fast and quiet. In and out in under 5 minutes. He looked at Reese. Staff Sergeant, you'll be with me and my number 2. We approach from the east. You make positive ID through thermals, then we execute. Any questions? No, sir. Good. Wheels up at 0130. Gear up. The helicopter ride to the target area took 40 minutes. Reese sat between 2 Delta operators who didn't speak. Didn't fidget, just sat in perfect stillness with their weapons across their laps. Professional calm. She tried to match it, tried to find that quiet center again, but her heart was beating faster than normal. This wasn't a 70-hour overwatch where she could become part of the terrain. This was fast and close and personal. They landed 2 kilometers from the target and moved in on foot, 8 shadows flowing through the darkness like smoke. Voss set a pace that was aggressive but sustainable, and within 20 minutes they were in position on a low ridge overlooking the compound. Reese went prone and glassed the building through her thermal scope. 4 heat signatures on the ground floor, 1 on the 2nd floor moving between rooms. Guards in the target most likely. Voss whispered beside her. Can you confirm? She adjusted the focus, trying to get details, but thermal only showed heat. She needed visual. Negative, I need eyes on. Then we moved closer. He signaled the team and they advanced, covering the last 100 meters in controlled rushes, using every shadow and depression in the terrain. They reached the compound wall and stacked up at the eastern entrance. Voss held up a fiber optic camera and threaded it under the door. The image appeared on a small screen, grainy but clear enough. 3 men sitting around a table drinking tea, weapons within reach. No sign of Masood. He pulled the camera back and they moved to the next entrance. Same procedure. This time the camera showed a guard standing in a hallway, alert scanning. Third entrance, kitchen, empty. Voss looked at Reese. He's not on the ground floor. He's upstairs. I saw the movement in the thermal. Then we need to breach. You ready? She nodded, her mouth dry. Stay behind me. When we clear the second floor, you ID him. Fast. We don't have time to linger. He signaled the team. Breacher moved to the door with a small charge. Placed it, stepped back. Voss held up 3 fingers. 2, 1. The charge detonated with a sharp crack and the door blew inward. The team flowed through like water weapons, up, moving with practiced precision. Reese stayed close to Voss, her heart hammering now, adrenaline singing in her veins. Shouts in Pashto. A guard appeared in the hallway and one of the operators dropped him with a suppressed double tap. No hesitation, no mercy. They moved through the ground floor in seconds, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats. Stairs. Voss took them 2 at a time with Reese right behind him. At the top, a hallway with 3 doors. He signaled left, center, right, and the team split up. Reese went with Voss to the center door. He kicked it open and swept inside, rifle up. The room was empty, just a prayer mat and some books. A burst of gunfire erupted from the right door. One of the operators returned fire. Someone screamed. Voss crossed the hallway and Reese followed. The right room was a bedroom. 2 bodies on the floor guards. And standing in the corner with his hands up, eyes wide with fear, was Tariq Masood. She recognized him immediately. Same face from the photo, same limp, same expensive sunglasses hanging from his collar. Confirmed, she said, that's him. Voss moved forward and zip-tied Masood's hands behind his back. The courier was babbling in Pashto, pleading, offering money, offering information, offering anything. We're leaving, Voss said to his team. 90 seconds. They moved back downstairs, Masood stumbling between 2 operators, out through the breached door, across the compound, into the darkness. And that's when everything went wrong. A flare shot into the sky from a nearby building, bathing the entire area in harsh white light. Machine gun fire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. Someone had been watching, waiting. It was an ambush. The team scattered, returning fire, moving to cover. Reese dove behind a stone wall as bullets chewed up the ground where she'd been standing. She brought her rifle up and started acquiring targets, firing controlled pairs, dropping fighters as they appeared. Voss was shouting into his radio, Brutus 6, this is Brutus 1, we are under heavy contact, need immediate exfil. The pilot's voice came back tense. Brutus 1, I'm taking ground fire, I cannot land in that LZ. Then we're moving to secondary standby. They fought their way east, dragging Masood with them, laying down, suppressing fire, moving by bounds. Reese emptied her magazine and reloaded, her hands steady now, her mind clear. This was what she trained for. This was what she was good at. An operator went down, shot in the leg. His teammate grabbed him and kept moving. They were bleeding fighters, bleeding ammunition, bleeding time. The secondary LZ was 300 meters away through open ground. Suicide to cross, but staying here was death. Voss made the call. Smoke out. We move on my mark. Smoke grenades flew. Gray fog billowed across the battlefield. Move, move, move. They ran. Reese fired as she moved, not aimed shots, just keeping heads down, buying seconds. She could hear the helicopter, now rotors beating the air, coming in hot and low. 50 meters from the LZ, 40, 30. Masood stumbled and fell. The operator carrying him tried to lift him, but took a round to the shoulder and went down. Reese grabbed the courier and hauled him to his feet, half dragging him toward the helicopter. 20 meters, 10. The Black Hawk flared and touched down door gunners, laying down withering fire. Hands reached out and pulled operators aboard. Reese shoved Masood inside and climbed in after him. Voss was last. He turned and fired one final burst, then jumped. The helicopter was already lifting as he hit the deck. They were airborne. They were clear. They were alive. Voss keyed his radio. Brutus 6, all personnel accounted for. Get us home. Reese sat back against the bulkhead, breathing hard, her ears ringing. Masood was curled in a ball on the floor, zip-tied and terrified. The wounded operators were being treated by the medic. Everyone was alive. Voss looked at her and gave a single nod. Professional acknowledgement. She nodded back. The flight back took 30 minutes. When they landed, CIA was waiting. They took Massoud, immediately loading him into a vehicle before the rotors even stopped spinning. One of the officers approached Reese. "Good work, Staff Sergeant. Positive ID under fire. That takes guts." "Will he talk?" "Oh, he'll talk. They always do." The officer smiled coldly. "By this time tomorrow, we'll know everyone he's been working with. This could break open the entire network." She watched them drive away with their prisoner, thinking about information and networks, and how many lives might be saved because of what they'd learned tonight. Voss walked up beside him. "You did good work out there." "Thank you, sir. Delta's always looking for good shooters. If you ever want to try out." "I appreciate that, but I'm a Marine." He smiled. "Fair enough. Semper Fi, Staff Sergeant." She walked back to her hooch as the sun was coming up, exhausted, but wired, too keyed up to sleep. She lay on her rack staring at the ceiling, thinking about the last 5 days, thinking about all the choices she'd made, thinking about what came next. The Silver Star ceremony. The media attention. Going home eventually. Trying to explain to people who'd never been here what it was like. Trying to be normal again. If normal was even possible anymore. She finally fell asleep around 0700 and woke 3 hours later to someone pounding on her door. She grabbed her sidearm out of habit before remembering where she was. Safe. On base. No threats. She opened the door and found Garrett standing there, freshly discharged from medical. A massive white bandage wrapped around his head like a turban. He grinned when he saw her face. "You look like hell." "Thanks. You look like you lost a fight with a lawnmower." "Close. Lost a fight with a sniper." He held up a paper bag. "Brought breakfast. Figured you hadn't eaten." He was right. She couldn't remember her last real meal. They sat outside on the steps and ate protein bars and drank terrible coffee while the base came alive around them. For a while, neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Finally, Garrett said, "Heard you went out again last night with Delta." Word travels fast. "Always does. They get the guy." "Yeah, they got him." "Good." He took a long drink of coffee. "You know you don't have to keep doing this, right? You've already done more than anyone could ask." "I know. But you're going to keep doing it anyway." It wasn't a question. She didn't answer because they both already knew. He crushed his empty coffee cup. "My orders came through this morning. They're sending me stateside. Medical separation. I'm done." She felt something cold settle in her chest. "Dylan, it's okay, really. The ear's not coming back, and my hearing's compromised. I can't spot anymore. Can't do the job right." He looked at her with something that might have been relief or might have been grief. "Truth is, I think I'm ready. I think I've had enough." "What will you do?" "Go home, see my family, figure out who I am when I'm not getting shot at." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe get a boring child, marry a boring girl, have boring kids. The whole boring civilian dream. Sounds terrible." "Yeah, can't wait." They sat there a while longer, watching the sun climb higher. Both of them knowing this was goodbye, even though neither of them said it. Finally, Garrett stood. "The ceremony's tomorrow. You nervous?" "Should I be?" "Probably. Lots of cameras, lots of speeches, lots of people telling you how brave you are." He paused. "Just remember you earned it. Don't let anyone tell you different. Not the brass, not the media, not even yourself." He walked away before she could respond, and she watched him go, thinking about endings and beginnings and how sometimes they looked exactly the same. The next 24 hours moved too fast. Uniform inspections, rehearsals. Her parents arrived on a military transport, looking older than she remembered, her mother crying before they even reached her. Her father standing rigid and proud with tears in his eyes. They hugged her and told her they were proud and asked if she was okay, and she lied and said yes, because what else could she say? That she still saw the 8 snipers' face every time she closed her eyes. That she couldn't stop calculating firing solutions in her head, even when there were no targets. That she didn't know how to be their daughter anymore. The ceremony was held at noon in front of the entire battalion. Reese stood at attention while Colonel Brennan read the citation, his voice carrying across the assembled Marines. Staff Sergeant Reese Callahan distinguished herself by exceptionally valorous actions while engaged with an armed enemy. Under intense enemy fire and at great personal risk, she eliminated 7 enemy combatants, saved the lives of 8 friendly forces, and secured intelligence that prevented mass casualty attacks. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself and uphold the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the United States Naval Service. Brennan pinned the Silver Star to her chest, and the entire formation erupted in applause. She stood there, feeling the weight of the medal, feeling the eyes of hundreds of Marines on her, feeling like a fraud because all she'd done was make choices and get lucky and somehow survive. The media interviews afterward were worse, reporters asking questions she couldn't answer. How did it feel to kill 7 enemy snipers? What went through your mind when you took that 1,000-meter shot? Do you think women belong in combat roles? She gave them nothing. Short answers, professional distance, no emotion. But one reporter, a woman from CNN, asked something that made her pause. Staff Sergeant, you received both a commendation and a reprimand for the same mission. How do you reconcile that? Reese looked at her for a long moment. I don't. I just live with it. But doesn't that feel contradictory? How can you be a hero and be disciplined for the same actions? Because war is contradictory. The right decision and the wrong decision can be the same decision. You just have to choose what you can live with afterward. The reporter pressed. So you have no regrets. She thought about Garrett bleeding beside her, about the choice to save him instead of staying on mission, about everything that followed. I didn't say that. I said I can live with it. Those are different things. The interview ended shortly after. Her parents took her to dinner at the base chow hall, the only restaurant for 100 miles, and they tried to have a normal conversation about normal things. Her mother talked about the garden. Her father talked about fixing the truck. She nodded and smiled and felt like she was watching them through a scope from 1,000 meters away. That night, she couldn't sleep again. She walked the perimeter of the base past guard posts and motor pools and sleeping barracks, trying to wear herself out, trying to quiet her mind. She ended up at the memorial wall where they listed the names of Marines killed in action. 73 names from this battalion alone. 17 of them killed by Khalid Rashid's bombs. She traced her fingers over the engraved letters, thinking about the ones who didn't make it home. Thinking about how thin the line was between her name being on this wall and her standing here reading it. A voice spoke behind her. Can't sleep either. She turned and saw one of the SEAL operators from Havoc's team, a younger guy she didn't know. He had a cigarette in his hand, even though smoking wasn't allowed on base. No. Yeah, me neither. He took a drag. Saw your ceremony today. Hell of a thing. Thanks. You know what Havoc said about you? He didn't wait for her to answer. He said you're the kind of Marine who makes the rest of us look bad. Said you did in 12 minutes what most snipers couldn't do in 12 days. He's exaggerating. I don't think he is. The SEAL stubbed out his cigarette. My girl back home asked me what I did over Tigran. I told her I couldn't really explain it. How do you explain it to them? The people who weren't here. You don't. You just smile and change the subject. Yeah, that's what I figured. He started to walk away, then stopped. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were out there watching over us. Made me feel safer knowing someone that good had our backs. He left, and she stood alone with the names, thinking about being good at something terrible. Thinking about how strange it was to be praised for killing people, even when those people needed killing. Her deployment ended 6 weeks later. By then, the intelligence from Massoud had led to 17 arrests, 4 weapons caches discovered, and 2 major attack networks disrupted. The CIA estimated her actions, both the sniper mission and the courier capture, had saved over 300 American lives. 300 people who would go home, 300 families who wouldn't get folded flags, and 7 enemy snipers who would never kill again, plus Khalid Rashid, plus the fighters she dropped during the extraction. The math should have felt clean, more saved than killed. Net positive, victory, but it didn't feel like anything except heavy. The flight home took 36 hours with stops in Kuwait and Germany. She slept most of it, dreamless sleep, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical. When they landed at Camp Pendleton, the entire battalion was met by families, by banners, by cheering crowds. She saw Garrett in the terminal with his parents, his head still bandaged, and they exchanged a nod across the crowd. No words needed, just acknowledgement. We made it. We survived. Her parents drove her home to a small town in Montana where nothing had changed and everything felt alien. Her childhood bedroom looked like a museum exhibit, her high school trophies gathering dust, her old life preserved in amber. She lasted 3 days before she couldn't take it anymore. Her mother found her sitting on the back porch at 2 a.m, staring at the darkness. Honey, what's wrong? Nothing, just can't sleep. You haven't slept since you got home. I'm fine, Mom. Her mother sat down beside her. No, you're not, and that's okay. You don't have to be fine. Reese felt something crack in her chest. I don't know how to do this, how to be here, how to be normal. Then don't be normal. Be you, whatever that means now. I don't even know what that means. Her mother took her hand. Then I guess you will have to figure it out. But you don't have to figure it out alone. They sat there together in the darkness, not talking, just being. And for the first time since coming home, Reese felt something that wasn't exhaustion or numbness or distance. She felt like maybe eventually she might be okay. The Marine Corps offered her a new assignment 6 months later. Instructor position at Scout Sniper School, teaching the next generation, passing on what she learned. She almost said no, almost walked away completely. But then she thought about Garrett and the gunnery sergeant at the range and all the people who'd helped her carry the weight. She said yes. The first day of her first class, she stood in front of 24 students, all of them looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. A female sniper instructor was still rare, a Silver Star recipient even rarer. They didn't know what to expect. She didn't give them a speech, didn't talk about her mission or her medal or anything that happened in Afghanistan. She just said, sniping is about making impossible shots under impossible conditions. But more than that, it's about making impossible choices. And sometimes the hardest target isn't the one in your scope. It's the decision you make when everything is falling apart and there's no good answer. One student raised his hand. Staff Sergeant, how do you know you're making the right choice? You don't, not in the moment. You just make the choice you can live with and hope it's enough. And what if it's not? She thought about that for a long time. Then you carry it anyway, because that's the job. Over the next 3 years, she trained 216 students. Some washed out, some thrived. Some went on to combat deployments and came back changed just like she had. She saw it in their eyes, the weight, the distance, the permanent alteration of who they were, and she taught them the same thing her mentor had taught her. There is no perfect decision in war, only the choice you can live with. One afternoon, a former student came back to visit. He'd just returned from Iraq where he'd made a shot that saved his entire squad. He wanted to thank her for the training, wanted to tell her it worked, wanted her to know he'd remembered what she taught him. What did you remember, she asked. That skill matters, but character matters more. That technology fails, but instinct endures. That the hardest battles aren't against enemies. He paused. They're against yourself, against your own choices. She felt pride swell in her chest. You learned well. I had a good teacher. He hesitated. Can I ask you something? That mission in Afghanistan, the one everyone talks about, do you ever regretted any of it? She'd been asked that question 100 times by reporters, by officers, by other Marines. She'd always deflected, but this student had earned an honest answer. Every day, she said quietly, I regret that it had to happen at all, that those men had to die, that Garrett had got shot, that I had to make those choices. But would I do it differently? No, because those were the choices I could live with, and I'm still living with them. Does it get easier? No, you just get stronger. He nodded and left, and she went back to teaching, went back to passing on the knowledge, went back to preparing young Marines for the impossible choices they'd face. Years passed. She was promoted to gunnery sergeant, then master sergeant. Her hair started showing gray. Her hands developed the calluses and scars of a career spent on rifle ranges. The nightmares faded but never disappeared completely. Some nights she still woke up seeing the 8 snipers' muzzle flash, still calculated that pivot shot, still heard Garrett grunt as the bullet grazed him. But she also heard his laugh, saw the SEAL team make it out alive, remembered the 300 lives saved. The weight was still there, would always be there, but she'd learned to carry it. On her 20th anniversary in the Marine Corps, her current class asked her to give them one final lesson before they graduated. Something they could carry with them, some piece of wisdom from 2 decades of service. She stood in front of them and said, you're going to face moments where there's no good answer, where the mission conflicts with your humanity, where you have to choose between following orders and following your conscience. When that moment comes, and it will come, you need to ask yourself one question. She paused. What kind of person do you want to be when it's over? Not what kind of Marine, not what kind of warrior, what kind of person? Because the uniform comes off eventually. The rank goes away, the medals get put in a box. But the person you are, the choices you make, those stay with you forever. One student raised his hand. Gunnery sergeant, what if we make the wrong choice? Then you own it, you learn from it, and you do better next time. Because that's all any of us can do. Another student asked, what if there is no next time? What if you only get one chance? She thought about 70 hours in the dirt, about 7 targets in 12 minutes, about the split-second decision to save her teammate, about everything that followed. Then you make the choice you can live with, she said, and you spend the rest of your life proving it was worth it. The class graduated 2 weeks later. She watched them receive their diplomas, watched them pin on their scout sniper badges, watched them become the next generation of warriors. And she knew some of them would face their own impossible moments, would make their own impossible choices, would carry their own impossible weights. But they'd be ready, because she'd taught them. because someone had taught her, because that's how the knowledge passed down one generation to the next one, choice to the next one, wait to the next. That evening, she drove out to a quiet hilltop overlooking the base and sat watching the sunset, thinking about all the choices she'd made, all the weight she carried, all the people she'd saved, and all the people she'd killed. The silver star was in a box at home. The reprimand was in her service record. Both were permanent. Both were true. Both were part of who she was. And when new students asked her about that mission, about those 12 minutes, about what it felt like to make those shots and those choices, she told them the truth. It felt like being human in the middle of something inhuman, like finding your character in the chaos, like discovering that the most important battle isn't against the enemy in your scope, it's against the person you might become if you make the wrong choice. And she told them one more thing, the thing that mattered most. When the world is falling apart and there are no good options and everything is riding on what you do next, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be the kind of person who chooses to save your teammate, who fights for the people beside you, who carries the weight of your choices without breaking. Because in the end, that's what separates warriors from killers. Not the skill, not the training, not the medals. It's the choices you make when no one would blame you for choosing differently. And it's the strength to live with those choices long after the shooting stops.